afternoon and welcome to the January 26, 2022 work session of the Eugene Urban Renewal Agency. Thank you for joining us in this remote meeting format we're using as our state and community continue to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. This format enables the City Council to meet and take care of business while keeping everyone safe. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials web page. And again, thank you all for taking the time to join us for this, what's going to be a really good conversation. So with that, our first item for the Urban Renewal Agency is the steam plant redevelopment proposed terms, and I turn that over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm going to turn it over to Will Dowdy to just jump into the presentation.
Well, thank you very much. I'm Will Dowdy. I'm the Community Development Director in the Planning and Development Department, and I'm one of the people on staff who have been working on part of this much larger riverfront project. I will share my screen. And now we should be good with slides. We last spoke to you about the steam plant in October when we presented an update on the project. And we used your feedback from that work session to finalize the approach taken with the proposed terms. Today's work session is an opportunity to move the project forward by taking action on the proposed terms for the steam plant. Over the last few years, the agency has strategically invested millions of dollars in this downtown riverfront to start the transformation of a locked industrial site towards an open urban environment featuring a park that will draw folks from around the region. In the next few months, the streets and infrastructure will be complete and the park will open. There will be a lot of people who experience it for the first time, and I think they'll suddenly understand what all the effort has been for. Later this year, when the first buildings break ground, it will be a similarly tangible experience to understand how the agency is leveraging the public dollars to attract a far greater private investment that will build out this neighborhood and bring hundreds of new homes to downtown. Today, we're here to talk about the steam plant, which really feels like the finishing touch to this entire undertaking. Prominently anchoring the southern end of the development site, the steam plant has the potential to be one of the iconic locations in Eugene, a favorite destination for you and your neighbors, and a must-see for anyone who's visiting. But as you can imagine, bringing the building into its next chapter will be challenging and will require collaboration, resources, and an experienced team. I'll start off by reminding you of our goals for the redevelopment of the steam plant. And as I talk about this and describe the project, I'm going to retread some familiar territory for you, the agency board. But for the sake of anyone viewing this and learning about the project for the first time, I want to make sure that I provide appropriate context for this unusual and ambitious project. As one of the prime ingredients of the former EWEB property, the steam plant can play an ongoing role as a signature element of the development, complementing the future housing and adding to the vibrancy of the riverfront park. The critical question for a building as old as the steam plant is not whether it will attract attention, but whether it will still be standing. In 2010, the EWEB master plan captured the community's vision for the historic preservation of the structure. One of the developers referred to the steam plant as an industrial cathedral. And when you've been inside it, you know how well that captures the spirit of it. There's nothing quite like it in our community in terms of the type of building, its historic use, and its location in such close proximity to the river. Recognizing the rarity of this sort of redevelopment opportunity, we want to get it right, making sure it's something that is accessible to the community and financially stable for the long run. It's a very complicated building, which makes it even more challenging to get it right. Knowing that some sort of public assistance is going to be needed to catalyze this redevelopment, we also want to make sure that the public invests in it only once, and that the redevelopment of the steam plant will be able to sustain itself. We knew when we started this process in 2018 that having a vision was not enough. We also needed a team with the capacity to realize the vision. And so you approved a process and criteria for disposition and redevelopment of the steam plant. After the RFQ was released in the summer of 2018, the selected development team, Dream Plant LLC, led by Mark Mixis of DeChase Mixis and Mark Frohnmeyer of Arcimoto, they were invited to prepare a full proposal. We conducted community outreach in early 2019, And in April of that year, the agency board selected the proposal to move forward, and we began our negotiations. Since then, we have been working with the development team to figure out a feasible building program and the necessary deal points to make it possible. And so here is the proposal for the second life of the steam plant. The Dream Plant team has plans to make the long-standing vision a reality. First, preserving and reusing the historic building and achieving that through its transformation into an iconic community, achieving that through its transformation into an iconic community destination that connects people with downtown and the Willamette River. Led by two individuals who grew up and built their careers in Eugene, the team understands the important role this building can play for our community, showcasing our assets while providing an opportunity for all members of the community to engage with Eugene's culture and natural environment. The building starts with gathering. The ground floor is a place where people can come to work and play, collaborate, and think big against the dramatic industrial backdrop of the steam plant, and where they can experience a setting for arts and culture, accompanied by Eugene's world-class beer, wine, coffee, and food. The team would partner with the city to offer community members and visitors opportunities to engage with the historic building and the river, including activation of a new overlook to be built on the existing water intake structure that sits on the edge of the river. A large restaurant space would be immediately adjacent to the riverfront park. And if the ground floor sounds like a good place to be, the rooftop deck, the publicly accessible rooftop deck, will offer even more, with more local food and drink and fantastic views of the Willamette River. Next, the cultural centerpiece of the building is a flexible and adaptive performance and exhibit space. This was something the Dream Plant team added after hearing community members share their desire to see the steam plant become a place for the creation and enjoyment of art. The venue will showcase Eugene's talented music, dance, and other performances, and be an engaging space for visual art, demonstrations, lectures, and speaker series. The building will feature local art prominently in fixed and rotating installations, and they are planning artist fellowship programs to help boost local artist exposure. The Dream Plant proposes to create a financial foundation for the steam plant's preservation with an independent hotel. They have been working closely with Embarcadero Hospitality Group, a hotelier that runs two locally oriented boutique hotels in Oregon, including the Independence Hotel just downriver in the city of Independence. In addition to lodging, the hotel would support the experiential aspects of the building, serving as a hub for Eugenians and visitors alike. The 70+ rooms would have a range of price points so that a variety of folks would be able to find something for them. Each space would celebrate the historic setting, incorporating the building's found items mixed with local art. In addition to providing the fiscal engine that keeps the building operations self-sufficient, there are benefits that would go beyond the walls of the steam plant, including the out-of-town visitors who would be bringing their money into our local economy, and the city's direct benefit from the transient room tax revenue generated by the hotel, which partially funds our cultural services department. The steam plant's unique proximity to the university, downtown, and the river provides an opportunity to build a knowledge transfer bridge, further knitting the academic community with Eugene's technology and entrepreneurship clusters. The building will include flexible office space, a mix of co-working, community and university classes, venture incubation for startups, and established anchor tenants. Finally, and bringing it back to where we started, the building is eligible to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and the team will pursue this designation. The designation process ensures the preservation of the building and the honoring of its historic character during redevelopment. The team is working with preservation experts on the design as they preserve the exterior of the older portions of this building and reconstruct the newest portion, which I think on most of these images is on the right side. And that part was constructed using asbestos-bearing transite panels. So we'll remove that part and build something better in its place. Inside the building, only one boiler remains, and it will be featured prominently in the performance space. The team also plans on preserving much of the existing equipment, putting it on display throughout the building, and incorporate it into interpretive features and art. That's the proposal. What does it take to give the steam plant a second life? This plan is estimated to cost about $56 million. This takes into account several factors, including the current state of repair, historic preservation requirements, the challenges of retrofitting for accessibility, and the escalation of construction costs. So that brings us to the proposed deal to make it happen. The terms for your consideration today are the result of our negotiation with DreamPlant LLC. The terms outline the roles and responsibilities of the developer and those of the city and agency. These proposed terms are included in your packet as attachment A, and I'll go over the key aspects. We start with the description of the project, most notably the commitment to preserve and adaptively reuse the building and the commitment to public uses. You can see the National Register and closing and construction the closing and construction commencement will be no later than 20 months from now. DreamPlant would participate in the public use of the adjacent park, particularly in this area that we call the Southern Plaza, where they would have exclusive concession rights. The steam plant has extraordinary bicycle access given its location on the river path, yet we recognize that many people depend on their cars for transportation. And so the terms articulate that the city, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead, that the city would work with the developer to identify off-street parking options for visitors, customers, employees, and tenants. The agency would contribute the property for $1. The agency's the developer would provide the dollar and we would provide the property. The agency's financial investment is approximately $1.5 million of urban renewal funds for the abatement of asbestos around Boiler 1 and payment of city fees for the redevelopment. The agency would also work with DreamPlant to identify other opportunities for project funds to cover the remaining funding gap of $5.2 million. To be clear, these are not funds that the agency or city is committing to contributing. Rather, the commitment is to work together to find the funding opportunity. This is best illustrated by our leading strategy. As you are well aware, the city is requesting $5 million from the state as one of our 2022 state funding requests. For additional context, here are some of the financial considerations to keep in mind. The projected district capacity after the agency sells property to Atkins Dame for vertical development will be about $3.2 million. The proposed agency investment in the steam plant, which would be for asbestos abatement, SDCs, and permits, we estimate to be about $1.5 million. Finally, the DreamPlant team is working to secure more than $49 million of the estimated project cost of $56 million. So based on these numbers, the agency's investment would be about 3% of the total project costs. The River Guides, the advisory group for the Riverfront Urban Renewal District, met in November to review the proposed terms in attachment A. The group unanimously recommended the proposed terms with the DreamPlant. I'll add that when they discussed the proposal in 2019, this group also expressed appreciation for how challenging the redevelopment will be and recognized the major challenges, including parking, financing, and balancing excitement with expectations. If you provide us with direction today, here's what the potential next steps would be. We'll draft and enter into a disposition and development agreement with DreamPlant. The team will then start their due diligence later this year, finalizing design and securing financing. The agency board would take budget action next year on the identified investment for the steam plant, and construction would start no later than September 2023. Before wrapping up, I'd like to explain why this decision is so timely. Perhaps you are wondering, as I was at one point, why the deal points need a decision prior to the final funding strategy. Why not wait until after the legislature's short session, when we will have certainty on that last piece of the funding puzzle? The first reason is simply that the credibility of our legislative ask is largely dependent on the agency's support for this project and the agency's financial participation. The state session begins next week, and we would like to be ready for it. Similarly, the DreamPlant team is eager to take the project to the next level with due diligence and assembling the investors and financing partners that are crucial to success. In order for them to move someone from the curious column to the committed column, they will need the agency's board approval of these deal points. I'll leave you with the agency director's recommendation, which is to approve the deal points and authorize her to enter into a disposition and development agreement with DreamPlant, consistent with the terms. And now, pass it back to you for your discussion, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Will. I appreciate you sort of walking us through the whole thing and the history. And their counselors are already lined up, and I just wanted to make one quick apology to council because I know many of you rely on getting physical council packets well in advance of meetings so that you can look at the physical document. And Jessica was out starting last Thursday and it threw that timing off. So I apologize for the late delivery of the packages and hopefully that won't happen again. And with that, I have Alan and then Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. I really like this project. I particularly like the preservation aspect and the historical aspect of it. I like the $56 million investment and the jobs that will create. And it's going to create very cool place. I think it's going to be a destination, especially the ground floor and the rooftop. And the boutique hotel will be very cool. Couple of comments, a couple of questions. One, the agency contribution. So we've got 1.5 million, we've got the 1.1 million in SDCs, 350,000 abatement, plus the land cost and the building cost or value. So that's well over $3 million. Question about the SDCs. It says in the terms that the agency will pay the building and development permit fees. Where does that come from? That's $1.1 million. Or approximately.
Yep. So the pieces that the agency would contribute, this would be coming out of the agency's tax increment funding would be going towards the payment of the SDCs and the asbestos abatement. And so that would be the urban renewal dollars would go to pay the city fees and would go to the work being done. And so our estimate total contribution would be $1.5 million there.
Oh, so that's the 1.5 million.
Yes.
So it's not specifically identified for like the overlook or anything like that. It's the SDCs and the abatement.
Right.
Okay, good. Thank you. That's very helpful clarification. For the funding identification, there's still a $5.2 million gap. It says work together to identify funding sources and strategies. I'm not sure what that means. What happens if it's not successful? Can we add non-city funds to that as part of the agreement? I'm assuming this does not include the remaining $1.7 million of urban renewal fundings. And why aren't we making that explicit?
That's something we could certainly make explicit if that's the direction that you want to go. The main thing that we wanted to achieve as we were drafting the deal points, and this is after hearing from you in the fall, was to make no commitment that the agency or the city would provide additional funds. If you want to be explicit that it's more than just an absence of commitment and say that there shall be no further agency funds, then that's something that you can do. But what we had heard from you was to remove any sense of commitment to go beyond the $1.5 million.
Yeah, I always find it helpful to be explicit when you have an intent. So I think we should add that. Another question about parking commitment. Again, it says we'll work together and work with the buyer to identify 125 slots. 125 slots, if it's structured parking, could be as much as $5 million. What does this mean, and what does this commit us to? And is there a requirement for parking for this building?
There is a requirement for parking for the building that's provided in the land use code. We don't have a final calculation of those numbers. This is the estimate that we've been working with the development team. One of the things that we are trying to do is come up with as many alternate ways for people to arrive at the site without getting there in a way that requires personal parking. But as I said, we recognize that many people do depend on that. We are, as you know, considering what the parking options are for this whole area, recognizing that there will be a lot of people who want to come here, especially when the park opens up, and that we want to have adequate parking. So we are working with the team and working on our own to try to find those options. There's no requirement that we would be providing them free parking spaces. What we would be doing is looking at options available and then figuring out if there is a way that they can have parking spaces at whatever parking spaces that are available for their use, whether that's charged for or not. We've talked with a number of the adjacent property owners about possibilities of putting in any kind of parking, whether it's structure parking or surface parking. And so we continue to explore those, but that's the extent of our commitment.
So to be clear, there's no commitment by the city to provide parking, which is expensive.
Correct.
There's to work with. Okay. On the asbestos abatement, I'm concerned about liability. In the terms, it says the project will buy, the buyers will buy as is. That means that we don't have liability for the asbestos removal and afterwards.
I will have to get back to you on that unless there's someone else on the call who knows the specifics about that.
I'll jump in really quick. I think when we sell as is, there would be a provision that you are selling it as is. And so I think, Will, the expectation is that we may do the asbestos abatement up front before the property is transferred, and then they would purchase it as is. Is that correct?
Yep.
So we would be able to make sure that the asbestos was abated at the level that removes risk of transferring the property and so forth. So, I mean, there's always some risk down the road because anyone could claim an environmental contaminated issue down the road. But our expectation is we would convey the property clean without the asbestos, and it would be on us to make sure it's clean and so forth. And
one of the risks is the cost of that. Those projects tend to be very tricky. So how confident are you in the $350,000 number?
It's an estimate that's we've been working with. It's I think the last time we had it checked in real specifically was in 2019. So we do expect that those costs will go up, but we don't know. We don't know exactly what it will be, but we'll work with someone to determine that. We're reasonably comfortable in our estimate there.
That's right. So it's approximately. Okay. And then right of repurchase, I'm glad to see that in there. If they don't do what they said they were going to do by time period, then we get it back. And then finally, the MUPD provision, that's not pre-approval of MUPD. It just allows them to do it, right?
Correct. And at this point, they are not proposing any multifamily for the building. So then it's a moot point. But if they do choose to go down that path and they get the necessary approvals from the agency director, then their understanding is that, or we want to flag that for you, that they would be pursuing a MUPD.
But it gives them the right to apply.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, and Mayor, I noticed the council that I have to leave at 1 o'clock, so I'll be dropping off. Thanks.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, Mike, and then Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure I've mentioned this before, and I'm not sure it's been brought up, but there is a very inexpensive 100,000 square foot building next door that we could buy and we need for $15 million that comes with 250 parking places, which would be double what we need. And those parking places are free. So just a thought. If we end up, is it possible that we will end up in a position of needing to do something with either urban renewal funds or some other general fund or other source of city funds to address the parking issue?
Yes, that's possible. One of the items that we want to bring back to you probably later this spring is coming back about the other priorities that the agency board has talked about for the Riverfront District. And you've talked about three. There's the plaza, there's the affordable housing, and there's parking and mobility options. And we're bringing those back because the agency board has asked for information about that.
Okay. The reason I say that is because we have other parks needs in other parts of the city. For example, Stryker Field, which we have, spent decades promising to the people of North Eugene, and whom we are now saying we can't complete the plans that we put out there when we passed the parks bond and asked for the money. That is continually brought up in neighborhood meetings, and I couldn't help but to say, I hope we're not going to be using funds that might be used to complete that, as it is a higher priority with regard to the promises we've made over time. But lastly on this, you mentioned some specific a specific company with regard to the hotel, boutique hotel involved. You mentioned some very specific things with regard to food use. And when I look at the artist rendering picture, what I see there is a lot of tables for people to be eating all around. So can you tell me more about any specific agreements we have in place with any of those, or not we, but rather the development folks have with any of those folks? Or is that just a hope that we'll be able to do that, to have them as part of it?
Those fall into two different questions. And I just want to be clear because we're talking about the deal points here. Let me start with the restaurant. What the Dream Plant team is committed to is providing a public gathering space at 7,000 square feet, approximately 7,000 square feet. About 2,000 of that would be performance space. The balance of that becomes restaurant and dining space. And that is something that we've articulated. And the reason why we have that specificity around it is because that is a place for community members to come in and be, whether or not they purchase anything. It's a place that is a critical part of making this building publicly available. Who the restaurateur is, exactly how that's put together is not something that we have specified. And that's something that would be part of the work that the Dream Plant team does.
They will be responsible for finding a lessor for that space. Correct.
Now with the hotel, what we have talked to them about is, and over the whole time we've been talking to them about, we're interested in what they do with the rest of the building. We're interested in their ability to provide a financially solvent building. And we know that those upper floors will be a really critical part of that, because the public space is something that doesn't contribute to the balance sheet in the same way that the rest of the building is. So right now their proposal is to work with a hotel group. This is Embarcadero Hotelier. That's the one that they are working with right now. That's at their decision. That's not something that we are weighing in on. But it speaks to the vision that they have for what they do with the space. And then, like I said, if they do want to change what the use is on those upper floors, that would be something that would require agency director approval.
Can you speak to the importance of natural gas to either the restaurants interested in using the restaurant space, or to the hotel?
The development team is, they are looking at what their options are right now. They are committed to a non-carbon based fuel source for all of their primary mechanical systems in the building. So that would be heating and cooling, would be electric powered through ground source heat pumps. The team is still exploring how the role of natural gas in the food service portions. They have personal and professional interest in electric alternatives to fossil fuels. And they're trying to figure out the feasibility of that when it comes to the restaurant.
So only they can speak to its feasibility and market application of whether or not they can find someone?
They are, so if I understand you correctly, what they're trying to do is figure out if they can come up with a compelling approach and a cost-effective approach to providing an electric-based alternative for the entire building. But right now, their commitment is to providing electric use for the primary building systems, with the caveat that they may find, for practical reasons, that they need to use fossil fuels for the restaurant space.
And if we impose the ability for them not to be able to do that, how will that affect the project?
It puts them in a box that they would need to work out of.
What sort of box would it put the city in if they can't develop a viable restaurant in that space?
If we put that in as one of the deal points, then they were not able to find an alternative approach, then they would be in a position where they either need to ask for us to modify the deal points, or they need to pull out of the project.
Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, is it possible for us to put in, as Alan had mentioned, with the specific caveats, that we will not put any monies that might be used to, any general fund monies or anything other than urban renewal into parking development?
That's something that you could add to this.
What do you imagine the impact would be from the development team standpoint?
At this point, there's no expectation, and we have not had no conversations about the city putting in general, anything further to the as contribution to the project. For the development of the parking, that's something that so I guess that would be something that would be more a factor in the city's ongoing decision-making process as we collectively, staff and agency board, work to try to find parking solutions here. I see Sarah has her hand up.
My question specifically was, what do we think the impact will be if we limit what we're able to do?
Sarah, do you want to speak to that?
It's hard to know what the impact of them would be. I was just going to weigh in on the commitment to not using anything other than this funding, like not using general fund or something else, is more of a conversation about a commitment amongst yourselves. It's not really anything that the development team, it's not a deal point with them, if that makes sense.
It is, but I'm talking project viability and what you think will be the impact.
If I could address the parking, Councilor Clark.
Yeah.
Parking is a revenue generating activity. So, there are times where we build parking and we can recover the cost, especially if it's a surface parking lot or something of that nature. If we have to make improvements, it can be a revenue backed activity. And so it's possible we could use one day when the parking fund's in a better situation, parking funds to create parking that we can then recover that investment with parking revenue. We could also use urban renewal funds. I don't see a case where any park money would compete with some other park for parking. I don't see us using park money to build parking at this point. But if you want to clarify that in the deal points, I think we could figure out a way to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, Matt, and then Jennifer.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. And Will, thanks for meeting with me last week and following up, addressing some of my concerns and questions. In response to Councilor Clark, you said, quote, people can come in and be, regardless of whether they purchase something. Am I to understand that the general public will have access to public restrooms at the Dream Plant facility? And if so, is that woven into the deal points? I can't find that expressed, but I appreciate you articulating it.
I'm going to ask Amanda if you're able to answer this with more specificity than I have.
Sure, yes. Councilor Keating, can you repeat the question just so I'm sure I know that you asked about bathrooms and public access?
Yeah, Will said, quote, people can come in and be regardless of whether they purchase something. My question is, am I to understand that is in reference to the general public having access to public restrooms, and is that articulated as part of our deal points?
Right, as you see, it's not in the attachment A stated deal points, but we have talked to the development team about that, and they have heard your conversations, prior council conversations about the importance of that. And similar to other restaurants and hotels in the area that have bathrooms, that is their intention. And then with the amphitheater, that's what I've heard in the conversations.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. So it's understood, but it's not expressed per se. On slide 13, however, what is expressed is, I believe you said that a private entity would have, quote, exclusive concession rights at the public park adjacent to the Dream Plant. Can you elaborate on that, please?
The section of the park that is between the steam plant and the river, including the future overlook that will be built on the water intake, that area is a part of our park system, and so it would be open to all. But like we have in some other parts of our park system, there would be a single concessionaire or all the concessionaire activity would be through partnership with the steam plant. And so, so you can bring your own food, but you would not be permitted to sell food to others. There's no requirement to purchase anything in order to sit there. That's important.
You called this project unusual and ambitious. I would wonder if it is, and mind you, a lot of this work has happened well before I came on council. So nevertheless, there are elements that I wonder are necessary in the highest and best use of public dollars. Do we need another boutique hotel in Eugene? Now, the overall benefit and the argument that you're making is clear if indeed, well, first, if we fundamentally clean up or spin off and rebuild, I guess, or repurpose an asbestos-ridden building that's vacant along the riverfront is a welcome benefit to the community. It's a welcome endeavor. Where I'm on the fence is I'm curious about the overall net benefit in regards to property tax revenue, income tax revenue from the undetermined amount of employees, private employees working at the steam/dream plant. And ultimately, I'm curious what the projected TRT revenue dollars would be coming in to the city. Is there a snapshot, an assessment over a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year period, what the overall revenue stream net benefit to the city of Eugene would be as we pivot to make such a significant ask of our state legislature?
And if you're on, I know that you can speak to these points well. Otherwise, I can take this question.
Well, I don't know that I can speak to them particularly well. I think those are really good questions. We just, the information from the hotelier is pretty new and we haven't run those numbers. I have really rough estimates on gross revenue, and so I haven't converted it to TRT. There's the local community safety initiative revenue that will be impacted by the revenue, the wages from the 75 jobs. The state will receive a income tax from that as well. We did estimate property taxes to be around $350,000 a year based on a super, super rough number. And we're working on those this week, and we should be able to get those to you in a couple of days.
Thank you. I wish those were in front of us now because it's informative in regards to my vote as part of the agency board. Finally, my question is for the city attorney. In my day job, I work for the Oregon legislature. There's no financial piece where I personally would benefit, but do I have to declare a real or perceived conflict of interest before taking this vote?
No, conflicts of interest are about financial benefit or detriment to you or someone you live or a business. So this doesn't have a financial benefit or detriment in that situation. So you're fine.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Jennifer and then Claire.
Thank you. So thanks, Will, again, for another great presentation. This is a really exciting project, obviously. And one of those reasons is because I often see people looking at old photos of downtown Eugene and being really disappointed that we used urban renewal to demolish older, unique buildings rather than saving them, because it was probably cheaper and seemed like progress. So this is an opportunity for us to kind of correct a path that we did badly in the past, I see. And 1.5 million, like, that's okay with me. That makes sense. I think this is worth that commitment, that these historic structures have value. And I'm very impressed with the team we found. I was worried that we wouldn't find someone. It's a big ask to make this building economically viable. And they've been very impressive. They've been flexible, and they've found what looks to be a path to success. And I'm happy to support them. And I'm excited to hear their commitment to an electric building. I'm not surprised by who's on the team, but it's exciting to know that someone's going to make that effort and see if they can make it work. And I'm excited to see how that works out and what they find. I think 1.5 is a good number, and I'm not currently interested in increasing that, but I also don't want to shut the door as if I would never consider anything else. This is a flexible situation, and things have changed already just in the time that this project has started. So I think the way things are written right now makes sense to me, and I'm willing to support them.
Okay, Claire, and then Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Will and team, again, for a good presentation. So I just want to give some little context, and then I have some questions and comments. It's possible I might need a second round. Yeah, so, I just want to remind particularly the public that this land would have had to have been remediated at a significant cost if we chose to demolish this historic building instead of doing what we've decided to do. Cost to us, the city and the taxpayers. And redevelopment of a former industrial site is significantly more expensive than building from scratch, or even doing a demolition of a commercial building to build something new there. And I share Jennifer's enthusiasm for the development team and how they've pivoted in light of the pandemic and their commitment to having the infrastructure of the building be all electric in terms of powering the building itself. And I feel like the investment we are making in terms of the 1.5 million is very small relative to the investment that the development team is going out to get, and relative to the gain. I think a rough estimate of 350,000 a year, that's pretty good. And unlike a MUPTI project, this project will start paying taxes as soon as it's in the hands of the private developers. Now, obviously not at 350K until their project's up and running and the property value appreciates. So we're moving a small piece of public land that has not been generating any tax revenues onto a tax generating business, in addition to creating a destination location and an amenity open to the public. I've heard more than one counselor, not just Councilor Keating, raise this concern about whether or not it's, you can go in there without buying something. I will point out that when I visit the Fifth Street Public Market, nobody comes around to make sure that I purchased a beverage or some food when I'm enjoying the court there, or when I go to use the restrooms. And so I think this will be very much the same dynamic. And if they are planning to host free arts events, including musical performances, they have to expect that people are going to come and need to use the restroom. So I've got a couple of other points I'd like to make, so I will put myself in the queue for another round.
Thank you, Randy, and then Emily. Oh, and Randy, did you have a comment that you wanted to interject in response?
Did you say me?
Yes.
Yeah, I did. The property tax revenue has been mentioned a couple of times, so I think it's important to disclose that it's possible, if they register this on the National Register, which is their intent, that it could receive a property tax exemption. The extent of that exemption could be only for certain improvements related to historic renovation. It could be for most of the building. We don't really know that yet, but I think we should just go into this with that understanding that it could get a historic property tax exemption. So I don't want to oversell that.
Thank you. That was an important piece of information. Okay, Randy, and then Emily.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Will, very much for the presentation. One of the nice things of going at the end of the queue is most of my questions have already been answered, and what Councilor Syrett and Ye said resonate very well with me. I am very excited about this project for all the things that reasons that have been stated already. I was very impressed with a meeting that I was fortunate to attend with Mark Miskus and Mark Frohnmeyer, and also the hotelier that's looking at the project. I like their vision. I love that the developers are from our community. They get our community. They are stakeholders and have a lot of skin in this game. So I'm feeling pretty confident about this. The one thing I would ask is, Will, could you just give just a short synopsis about the complexity of this project? And the reason I'm asking this is more for the public, but I have heard from people in the community that feel like we've put money into this thing, more money to come, and we're giving it away for $1, but there's a reason for that. And I think that that's important to try and push as much information as we can so the public understands what this entails and why we need to make this investment. Thank you.
Sure. So I'll try to do the short version, and there's certainly much longer versions of this, but when you take on a property like this, and you know this if you live in any kind of property that's a little bit older, there's work that needs to be done on it, and so this property has a lot of work that needs to be done on it in order to make it a space that can be used for people. And this is one of the reasons why we have not had large open houses in this, where we bring the public in to talk about the building, is because the building is not safe and accessible for people to be in. And so we're talking about some really basic fundamental things, like making sure that the building has adequate heating, adequate cooling, and then has an envelope that will keep that heat and cool inside the building in a responsible way. And that's what our energy codes come into play. We need to make sure that people who have all sorts of mobility abilities can come into the building. And right now you walk into the building by going up a flight of steps. And then if you've been inside the building, you know that the whole inside is just covered with these metal steps and ladders that aren't particularly comfortable to be on for anyone. So one of the things that needs to happen is you need to have an accessible entrance, and then you need to have an elevator to provide access to all levels of the building. Same thing can be said for restrooms and making sure that there's adequate restrooms. So these are just the basic things beyond the asbestos abatement and the environmental considerations that need to go into this building before it is a building that has real value. Before it's a building that you can then start to cut up into pieces. So this is not the same as the city trying to sell one of its other properties. I know no one's asking about this, but to sell the library or to sell the atrium building, or to sell a property like that, a rec center. Those buildings are built to current code, and they're useful in contemporary modern uses. This building is really good for a 1930s steam plant. It's going to take a lot of work to turn it into something that is a restaurant space and a hotel space and a space to comfortably view the arts.
Thank you, Will. And not to belabor this, but this is to preserve this building. My understanding is it's more expensive to take this path than it would be to build a whole new structure on bare dirt, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Emily.
Thank you. I've been very enthusiastic about this project from the beginning. I got to go tour the steam plant when I was first a counselor and fell in love with it. I really am encouraged and thankful that the team listened to council's concerns when we first saw the project and responded to that, and of course to COVID. I do think it will be iconic and will be a big draw. So I'm very appreciative that there will be a range of hotel room prices. And of course, that the public can get there was my really large concern, that it was open to everybody like the park will, and not be a separate, we need dollars to get in. So I truly appreciate that. The attention to using electricity, that's very important. So I share Claire and Randy and Jennifer's enthusiasm. I hope we all have that for this project. And We do have the 1.5 million in renewal funds, and I do support Stryker Field. So I think we shifted some things around to renewal funds so we could have some bond money for Stryker Field. I'm really looking forward to this. So please support it. Thank you.
Thank you. I have 3 counselors that want a second round, but I'm going to just jump in the queue first and it just reinforce my support for this project, which I just think is just a tremendous boon to our community. It is a extraordinary building. I love the description of it as an industrial cathedral. It really feels that way when you're in that space. It's just spectacular. And I think when we think about we have private developers, local private developers who care about this community, putting over $49 million into this and working to fill the gap. I mean, that's extraordinary. There are a lot of other places in this community where we would love to see someone step up and put, millions of dollars into a development. So it's very, very powerful. And the city's financial commitment is very small. I want to just honor Councillor Evans, who is not here today, because I know Alan is a number of you are concerned about any additional city funds, and remind you that Greg had been interested in bringing back for some discussion an extension of the urban renewal district timeline in order to, gain more money through that tax increment financing. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just reminding you that he's not here to put that proposal forward. And so I just want to remind you that that was in his mind. And so with that, I will turn it over to Alan and then Mike for a second round, and then Claire.
Yeah, I would usually wait at the end, but I have to go to another important work meeting. So I asked the city attorney if she could help me with some language. Catherine, do you have that for an amendment?
Yes, I sent that to you, but I'll pull it straight up. It was a direct message to you. So it needs to be, because you're proposing to amend the deal points, your motion needs to be made after the main motion is put on the table. But your motion would be to amend the other financial assistant paragraph to add a sentence that states, it is understood that neither agency nor city funds will be used to fill this funding gap. But right now there's not yet anything to amend. So you'll just want to wait until main motion gets put on and then be recognized to make this amendment.
All right, or that could be a friendly amendment. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike and then Claire.
Thank you, Mayor. I too want to echo, because my first questions were very direct. I want to echo my excitement at the redevelopment of this building, and for many of the same reasons that my colleagues said. The idea that I love the local development team and think they're perfect to be able to do this. I think it is a boon for the community. I think what Claire said is important too, that there's a liability right now, and it's always going to be more expensive to do this, and we're creating something much better out of an old industrial site right on cherished ground for so many of us on the riverbank. And I think those are all exceptionally important. And I think their vision of what they would like to do with regard to the electric heat source issue and cooling source is absolutely in line with our values, and we need to do that if we can. My concerns and my questions are direct at, I have concerns about economic viability for this, and what the city may be asked to fund later because of conflicting decisions that keep us from getting to economic viability. So I guess the best questions, rather than try and belabor this with a lot of amendments this time, my question will be around timeline. Can you tell me what we're restricted or what will be in stone if we vote in favor of this now and cannot be altered later with regard to our agreement with the developer?
Sure. So if you direct the agency director to move forward with these deal points and to enter into a legal agreement, then staff would immediately begin working on that disposition and development agreement. And so at some point we would enter into a contractual agreement with the development team. So there's so that is the immediate result of your action if you take that if you make that yes vote today. The agency has the you have the ability to revisit decisions and come back to things. That's your continual prerogative to revisit your own decisions, but the actions that you take, if you take a yes vote, will lead to us entering into an agreement. And so that would be something we would be working on as quickly as possible, but that doesn't happen overnight.
Thank you. And any additional funds, for example, in any of the things you said where we are working out details later or remaining open, those are all decisions that will come back to council, correct? Or
yes,
to the agency?
Yeah, any further funds.
Is it possible that we will expend money in the process and come back to those deal points later and have to make a decision of lose monies we've already spent in the process if we come to a difficult place, or we'll be forced to spend more money in the future in order to maintain the viability? In other words, we spend some money up front, they get to a place where they can't move forward unless we say yes to something else. Or is it likely we'll get in that position?
It's not likely we would get into that in any substantial way, but of course we'll be paying for staff time and legal fees and things like that, which is I don't think was what you're talking about. The main spending requirements that would go on the agency that would go on the agency would be these two large items: the asbestos abatement and the permits and SDCs. The permits and SDCs will not be relevant until until they have gotten through a building permit phase. So that's much farther down the line, and both of these decisions won't happen till at least 120 days until we get out of the due diligence period. The agency board has to approve spending over $250,000, so that both of these would qualify for that. So you'll have before we spend substantial project dollars, you'll have the opportunity to make a careful decision about your willingness to go forward with this.
So it sounds like we're gonna clean up the asbestos, and that's about it with regard to major costs before it comes back for other decisions later, where they may be more difficult decisions about cost benefit analysis, right?
Yes, except that we won't even do the asbestos abatement until you approve us spending that money.
Okay. I'm willing to vote in favor of it for two reasons. One, I love the dream of it and all of the things that my colleagues have said. Number two, I want to do a good ask of the legislature with all of us on the same page. But I have great concern as we move forward with economic viability in some of these, because I think we're talking about hopes and assumptions with some confusion. So thanks.
Okay, Claire and then Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. So a point I wanted to make, and then I also have a friendly amendment that I'm going to want to make. So on the parking question, I mean, I think there's a lot of creative ways we can find the parking without building more parking. For example, we could utilize our existing downtown parking structures and come to an agreement with LTD to use the MGO to take people back and forth to the site, right? One day we'll be able to use the MGO again. And then if we have to purchase a building at the cost of $15 million, the parking that comes with that building is definitely not free. We're trying to get rid of a building, not buy a new one. Sorry, Mike, couldn't let that one go by. So I had been operating under the assumption that BOLI had already decided that this was a prevailing wage project, and that's why we have a $5 million gap. But I saw in the notes of our AIS that this determination has not yet been made. And so I have a concern that if BOLI decides it's not a prevailing wage project, that the developers won't be paying the prevailing wage. And that would not be okay with me. So I am going to have a friendly amendment to include a deal point that the developers shall pay prevailing wage regardless of Boley's determination.
Second.
Yeah, well, we don't have a motion yet, so.
Oh, sorry, my
Thanks, Counselor.
enthusiasm jumping through the Zoom.
So Denny or Will, you know, is that some kind of poison pill? I mean, we're set up to go to the legislature to make this ask, so it shouldn't, you know, matter.
I'll jump in. We're making an assumption that this is a prevailing wage project because that's the determination that they made on the Atkins and Dames portions of the project. You can't actually get a determination until you have a deal, a development agreement that we can then present to Boley and say, is this a prevailing wage project? So the reason we don't have a determination is just, it's too early. But we have made the assumption, and the estimates that you see around the cost and the gap does assume a prevailing wage, because that's just an assumption we've made in the project.
Right, so my question is, if we add to the deal points, this project shall be constructed using prevailing wage. Right now, everyone's assuming that that's what we're going to have to do anyway. Is that, do you think that is some kind of poison pill?
It's already assumed in the development agreement and the cost,
okay,
and the gap and so forth. So I don't see why it would be, as you say, a poison pill, because we've already kind of made that assumption.
Okay. So once our main motion is on the table, I'm gonna make that amendment. Unless the city attorney says that I can just add the amendment to the main motion.
You can. As the maker of the motion, you could add that in. And if your colleagues do not want to approve that, they can vote down that motion, and then you would remake the motion.
Okay.
Without it.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. Matt.
Thank you. And thank you, Councilor Syrett, for bringing up the piece about prevailing wages and how much of a critical component that is. It may be a conversation for a work session at another time for the city of Eugene to align with Lane County, with Lane Community College, and now our 4J partners to have a community benefits agreement or a project labor agreement, a CBA or a PLA that calls for families earning workers earning benefits for their entire families, locally sourced materials and goods, and Oregon-centric labor force at prevailing wages on all projects greenlit by the city. Matt Keating has been debating with Matt Keating, my internal struggle here. And I love hearing the advancing electrification at the steam/dream plant. I love the opportunity for cranes in the air, creating living wage jobs at the work site and beyond. I love the community aspect as articulated by Councilor Semple, and the art hub as articulated by colleagues. While there may be a little heartburn over the lack of a potential property tax as originally envisioned, there's still TRT, and there's still an opportunity for vital beautification along our riverfront and job creation. Do we have any snapshot, Will or city manager, about the number of jobs created should this advance?
Our expectation is that it's about 75 jobs. One of the things that goes along with a hospitality hotel is that there's new jobs that are required for that, and many of them, they're at a variety of income levels. So some of them are entry-level jobs.
Okay, that's helpful. The other part is, I've been crowing about the need for an urban renewal district along transit lines. And if there was a building like this in which the city was going to put up $1.5 million, we were going to ask for $5 million from the legislature, and private enterprise was going to put up millions upon millions of dollars to refurbish and beautify a project, I would hope that we would enthusiastically applaud such an endeavor. So Mayor, as Councilor Clark pointed out, I'm going to stand united as we advance a significant ask with our lawmakers, but in this special, or excuse me, in this short session, it's imperative that the state of Oregon recognizes significant investment to our community and to our values. And I look forward to standing with the majority in the affirmative, applauding this project. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great, I'm happy to hear that. And if there are no other questions, I'm ready to put a motion on the table.
Okay. Move to authorize the agency director to enter into an agreement for the sale and redevelopment of the steam plant property that is consistent with the terms in attachment A, with the addition that of the deal point that the project shall be constructed with prevailing wage, and continue working with the development team during the due diligence period to identify funding and strategies to cover the funding gap.
Second.
Discussion of this motion. Alan, you have your hand up?
Yeah, either a friendly or I'll make the motion to move to amend the other financial assistance paragraph or section, add the sentence that says, it's understood that neither agency nor city funds will be used to fill this funding gap.
Meaning the 5.2
million.
Okay. Yeah. I'm fine with that as a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Councillor Keating?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other discussions? So let's see. Do we have to approve the, it's a friendly amendment. So we just can.
It's now part of the main motion.
That's now part of the main motion. Okay, fine. So all in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's excellent. Unanimously, and I really think this is a wonderful vote by all of you. I'm very, very happy to see this move forward. And Mike, you want one more comment?
Yeah, I'm fine with having just voted to include Councillor Surratt's amendment. I'm fine with it being prevailing wage. And I know this may sound silly since we're already done voting, but I'm asking for the sake of us being strategically successful at the legislature. If the project already assumes that, and we have the ability to add that at a later point, would it not be wiser to pass it without that amendment, thus giving the legislature an opportunity to add it in their funding and thus maybe have a more successful ability to pass that if you leave that option for them to improve it or do as we have done here to say we want to add this important value, and under that condition we'll do it, and give us greater success or hope for success at the legislature. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know who would speak to it since we don't have our intergovernmental folks here.
Well, we have Claire, who is chair of the IGR, and so she could speak to that, and I'd be happy to speak.
Claire, I think you get what I'm suggesting here. I don't know that it would be, but I'm just asking the question because I want us to succeed at the state legislature.
I'm happy to respond. That's why I answered, raised my hand. Yeah, I was thinking this is a good question for the IGR. It's kind of why I quizzed Denny a little bit. So, from what Denny's understanding is and the developer's understanding is, there's a very high expectation that BOLI will say this is a prevailing wage project. And so I believe particularly our Lane County delegation are all operating with that same assumption. So I don't think we're disadvantaging ourselves by saying this is a value we have. I was actually forecasting, well, what if BOLI decides it's not? And then the legislature has given us an extra $5 million. What's going to happen then? Are we going to give it back and not pay the prevailing wage? That seems perverse. So I don't think strategically that it hamstrings us, but if other folks have different opinions, obviously they're welcome to share.
I just want to be clear. My question, I agree with you. I don't think it hamstrings. What I'm saying is we're handing someone in the legislature, I don't know what to call it, but an opportunity to, in their opinion, improve the bill and thus gain greater support of someone's vote that might have been reticent in the first place if you allow them to fix the proposal at that level rather than this one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and this might make it easier, Councilor Clark. If we get $1 million or $5 million in state funding, it is a prevailing wage project. It's a given.
Okay, I got you.
I think it's something
So,
we can negotiate.
just asking the question, but I'm glad I voted affirmatively. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you, Will, for shepherding this project all the way through, getting us to this point, and now moving forward. I'm really very, very excited. And I think we're all going to be proud of this action as we see this materialize in a new form. So thank you very much. And we have 20 minutes. Manager, is there, or should we just, is that not enough time for the?
I think it's going to be really rushed. And so
Okay.
I recommend we just keep it as a possibility for another open session, because it's it'll be a great presentation and you'll want to.
Okay, yeah, I know. I'm looking forward to that presentation, so I want to make sure that we have a chance to enjoy it. So with that, you have all found an extra 20 minutes in your day, and congratulations, job well done. It was nice to have you join us, Randy, and you're looking tan already. So thank you all. Have a good afternoon. We're adjourned.
Good job, Will and Denny.